Trāt parau no te arwhau te atua. Te arwhau no te atua, no te taatuara.
Very good question, thank you.
Maruru no te wita mai te. Hello, in the names of God. Here's my question. It's in a global question. I was happy to know that a bishop is coming and the bishop is taking care of Pacific Asia. And we are blessed that you gave the class this week. Here's my question.
Est-ce qu'on aura droit à des chiffres pour montrer l'évolution, comment l'Église...
He wants to know if we have any numbers of how many pastors we have in Pacific, Asia, how many pastors have been ordained for many years to now. So we can have a large vision how God impacts in the life of the people, especially in Pacific Islands. And 2 years ago, the president encouraged us to have participate between the congregation and also in other countries like Hawaii, New Zealand. And it's good to know that in the other country we have the same difficulties about the priesthood.
Ça a permis de toucher et débranler les consciences sur place, à tel point que les retours que j'ai eus, le président de l'église de Hawaii nous a appelé pour nous dire merci pour ce passage.
And because the congregation here went to Hawaii and they bring blessings to Hawaii people, Hawaii members.
Au travers de cette mission que Seigneur nous a envoyée, on a pu apporter une petite contribution à la mission et à tout pays au niveau pacifique.
He wants to know if a small congregation in French Polynesia, we have blessed one congregation in Hawaii. So what about we can bring a blessing to other countries in the Pacific, Asia Pacific area?
I'm going to make sure I understand. He would like to know first about pastors in India, how long they've served.
India or Asia Pacific. He wants to know if we have recorded numbers of pastors from many years to now.
Okay.
Do we have any statistics about it?
And then also asking about small congregations and having a relationship with other congregations to bless. And okay, I think I understand your question. India is a very diverse nation and many cultures in one nation.
Ia tamai te tātou te whenua prauhia India, Initia, no atu ho whenua te I roto rei te ho whenua, rawera mau peutunu, I roto ngai te ho whenua.
We have 7 mission centers in India.
Te wei nei hitu pūmitioni, I roto noa te tuha whenua.
South India Green Valley is in the state of Tamil Nadu.
Te wei rātou ti roto te whenua Tamil Nadu.
And in India, that's the very southern portion of India.
E te tuha whenua te apatoa ia no te whenua Initia.
In that state, they speak the language of Tamil.
Te reo I proprohi tau whenua, trai
and it's a very big area, but we only have 4 congregations.
E tamai te tātou e te tua whenua I rororo, e te apa I whenua te, whenua I tirahei te. E I roto no e te tua, e te wenei e maha amuir an eiro.
When we began the mission center, we had 1 congregation.
Hamatahi e teri a whenua, ho e no I a pumitioni.
It is now expanded to 3 congregations and 1 emerging congregation.
E te nei, te wenei e toru, whatataro e ho e mai e whamai. E toru amuir a papu mai e te tai e pupuno.
Each congregation is led by an ordained pastor who is either an elder or a 70.
E rito I te mauna amuir a e toru, e rata hia te na amuir a te tai pereti putero, a rera te tai hitu ahoro.
2 of those congregations are, the 70 are women.
E ho e o na amuir a e piti, te oromitua hitu ahoro, e tuahini.
The first women ordained 70 in India.
E te I te tuahine o te whatoru a mata mohi e te toru a hitu ahoro.
We have a emerging congregation in Chennai, which is one of the largest cities in India.
Te wei to ara ho e pupu o te whatataro I te whaingingi ho e amuir a, I rito I te tua whenua Chennai.
We also have the church in the state of Andhra Pradesh.
Te wei to ara ho e amuir a I rito I te tua whenua tāne Parihora.
And we have a mission center, Andhra Pradesh Mission Center.
E te wei te riau hai ho e pūmitioni, o hamaurohia ho e pūmitioni te riau hai.
In Andhra Pradesh, they speak the language of Telugu.
E te I te reo tārato e paraparu, te ligoi.
We have 3, in South India Green Valley, we have 1 full-time World Church minister.
E rito I te tua, te wei ho e orometua, o te raweira tuhupana e tareti anu.
And his name is Joshua Bennett.
Tōnai e oa Joshua.
And Joshua is very young, high priest who at World Conference was set apart to the standing high council of the church.
E tauara hei ona, e ruto I te ap ora no te ao nei, wa tuhi ona I ruto I te ap ora te ia mea tomite piriroa, tomite teitei pe te ria piriroa I perite nira amatamo, le o conseil.
In Andhra Pradesh, we have 3 full-time World Church ministers.
E te tei toa whenua, te wene e toru orometua, te rawe atu e tuhipana te taretia.
And they serve as Mission Center President, Mission Center Financial Officer, and then a field minister.
Te weira te peritini o te pumitioni, te epiti topo, e te tei missionaire, te limitiana.
At one time, we had 25 congregations in Andhra Pradesh.
E ho e teime, wara aero hoi e piti ahuru mape mau amuir ai rutono te ria toa whenua.
We now have 12.
Tēnei, hare maraari ona ahuru mapiti.
The unique problem in Andhra Pradesh is that very different culture than other parts of India, and these pastors had come from other churches.
E te whaiwhiwhiro I ruto I te toa whenua, no te ria I hare piti ahuru mape, hara meiraro, no te mea, e rawe raheirua mo I shotumu I rutono. I rutono te ria toa, nene ho e teime no tra toa, e taritia e reo e peu e.
They were ordained now in our church, but their history was with another church.
E te imhana wau mai rātou wa whatoru arohi e rātou I onomeitua rito te taritia, are ara, tō rātou tua a ai, te wainua reia I rito I tara I taritia teito.
3 of the congregations were pastored by women.
E toru amoir ai rito te toa whenua, e mau tuahine te mau ti ei amoir a.
In these congregations, on my first trip to Andhra Pradesh, I visited every single one, and I visited many of the members and asked them about, why are you part of Community of Christ?
E a tere mātāmua e iau I rito te toa whenua, o hari o wharerei na amoir a paurua, e te I e tāuir ai a rātou. No te ha o tau, I hara mai e rito te autei no te metia.
I got 2 different answers in most of the congregations.
E piti nau pahono rā, I roto I te mau amuira.
One common answer was, I'm here in Community of Christ because of my pastor.
Hoe, te ie. O tai mai iau I roto I te taritia no te mea, te pēra o I tau te amuira.
And the other answer that I received in other congregations was I'm here because of what Community of Christ stands for.
I ruto I te tei pahanora, tēnā ora rātou wahara mei au ruto I te taretia, no te mea te turu nei au I te parau a te au teino te metia I porora.
In Andhra Pradesh, you were pastor for life.
I ruto I te tua whenua a Pradesh, ia riro na o orometua, re no toe no teime. Orometua o amori no atu.
When I arrived, the pastors were self-appointed, and they were not willing to give up their position of responsibility.
Mai te mea ra ia pina hei, ia horo ana hei te tei tapura hupa no te ria orometua, ere te me ohi no te tatara ai ai te ara atona.
And as I inquired more, I learned that they were the only priesthood member in their congregation.
Wa tāmau no wau tare ma te parau taro atu te taimei te wene te tino au tauara I ruto I te amuira.
And why were not others called to the priesthood?
E hara te tumu ai te taimau parai hara mai au tauara.
They told me because if there were other persons ordained, they might try to take over being pastor, and I don't want any competition.
Tēnā ora pai te teipai, me te peo hare ona mea amuira ora rei orometua, ai te mato tau aho oi tata pe ane ana, ora rei pe ana. Riro te rei pene a pai pito hi wau, ai te o tau aho hare o hia.
Some of our churches have the name Community of Christ on the entry.
Te wera te teimo whare o papahia te oa Community de Cristo, au teino de metia.
And some have nothing.
Te wera aita.
And that's not unusual because India is primarily a Hindu country and Christians are a very small minority and are often persecuted.
I ruto I te tua whenua, me mātou rohi ai, te pei piahia te oa te taritia, no te mea te reira o te taritia I o, taritia Hinduism, te tra te reira o te taritia I ruto I te ria whenua, me iti roa te mau te rititiana.
But I learned the reason they don't have a sign is not because of that, but if they put Community of Christ on their church, then they will not get money from other churches.
Hamatari wo te uiwi hare, e hapa I tuhi te o te taritia.
That's why we
te pahonora, te naora pai aita, tūnehi au taino te metia, ai te pei tara mo taritia horo aho mai te muni. Noria me mete I tu te o te taritia.
That's why we used to have 25 and now we have 12.
Norira mara ai tra numera piti horuma pe amuira, mara mai raro piti horuma piti noi amuira te toi mai.
We have 12 congregations now who are there because of what Community of Christ stands for.
Tra mo amuira te toi mai tra horuma piti, te ora nei rato no te mea te turu nei rato te parau no te autei no te metia.
Who are now calling women and others to the office of different priesthood positions.
Ia tāmai te tātou I te whenua no initia, I tra ano tau, te pei tuhine te ria whaito. I te ramahana, ua hamata te ria wārua, I te whaari ihi te ria tua whenua, te wene tau tau ara tuahini rato I te ini.
And now each year they approve their pastor and approve a budget.
Te mahana, te mau mahana harehi mai nei, nā taraihua amuira hamana I tāna tapura whawha, hamana te mau amuira atoa.
And they have a financial officer who is responsible for the care of the finances.
Te imahana, te weirahoa tō rātou mau rauti whawha, I roto nohoa te amuira, nā rātou ti a usoi tō rātou mau amuira.
It is interesting, the missionary that we sent into Andhra Pradesh to work with our leaders was one of our 70 in Tamil Nadu.
Mai te mea ua tono hi atu te tei hitu hauru I te ria tua me horu whiwhiri I te whiriurira. Ua tono hi ona I roto atu I te tei tua whenua.
And Brother Prince Daniel left Tamil Nadu to go to a state where he did not speak the language, but wanted to share the gospel and the values of leadership and the enduring principles with our staff to enrich the life of the church in Andhra Pradesh.
Mai te mea te mau orometua, ua hare o ia no atu te mau whiwhi tupu, hare no o ia hapi I te parau no te arata e taritia, I te parau no te hapipi ai e te mo oromitua, iani nehe rātou e tai tō e whaito e arata e taritia.
The state of Odisha.
Hari tātou ni a tra whenua o Odisha.
It's considered South India, but it is more East India.
Te tua whenua te hareri o nei te hiti Aotearoa.
That is where we have the largest church population.
I ruto I te ria tua, te ria te wahi, I reirua e te mero o te taritia.
Probably about 12 to 13,000 members.
Oh my God. Ai te reirua, ahuru mapiti tautini e tātai o. Ai te reirua, ahuru mapiti tautini.
5 mission centers.
E maha, e pā pūmiti o ni te ria wai.
But for 50 years, they operated under a structure that you would not be familiar with.
E rawera hei mataheiti te ienei, wa paraunuhi e rātou e te hare auto, e orara auto I raro e te tei whātere rā, no te tei whanhau rā.
They were organized into what are called pallies, which is kind of like a district.
E wa huipa rātou e te tera whātere rā no te mea amui, mai e tātou e tera anu taura, pai au.
And the head of the pally was called the pastor.
E rito I te ria tua, e pihi ai e orometua.
And each pally would have between 15 and 30 villages in their pally.
E rito I te ria whanhau rā, te wei nei e horu mapa oiriri I rito I te ria tua.
The individual villages had no priesthood members.
E rito I te ria mau oiriri, e mero an aia, ai te autau ara ato te ria wahai.
Only the pally pastor was ordained.
Te mau mea orometua no I te ria tua no pāle, o rātou e te whātoro ahia.
And so they would visit once a year at most the different villages where they would then offer the sacraments.
E mi te I te whanhau rā, e tere te I tāta e hoe a te me te mataheiti no te hare whorome, no te hare mea e hapi te mo tāta atoa, te mo oiriri e wainei.
In that culture, women were not ordained.
E rito I te ria whanhau rā, ai te te motuahine e tātura I te autau ara.
Brother Rick Moppet and I, when we were assigned there, realized that the enduring principles have not been rooted into the essential nature of the church in Odisha.
E whāritura maua te apo te toro Rick Maupini te ria tua, e ua I te maua e aita te parau no te arata I atamoa e taritia I haparihi atura I roto I te nuna ata.
And that the pally structure was not consistent with the enduring principles of the church.
E ua I te tō maua I taua te mera, ai te I huru whaatere rā, I pāri mai te I te parau no te arata I atamau.
And so over a period of 5 years, we began to work for transformation, moving from the pally system to the mission center model and to the congregational model that you're familiar with.
Nen he tai o e pāmataiti tō maua apo te toro tere no ara I rito te ria whanhora no te pāle, no te hapi ai a rātou e te wera tra whanhora no te pūmiti oni, e te wera whanhora no to e amui rā.
And the pally pastors, when they realized that they may not be a mission center president, fought against the change.
E te ira orometua no te pāle, ai te pai ona I afrod I tera manaua, e te ona whāira te tauira no te ne whātere rā.
When I first arrived in Odisha, there were 25,000 members.
E tau te mātāmua ai o, e piti ahuru mape tautini noa mero I te ria wahai.
When the pally pastors saw that their power and authority might be challenged, they left the Community of Christ and about 10,000 people went with them.
E mai te mea rai, ua I te hia pai mea orometua pāle, ua I te pai te maumero rai, te rato āwhorora I te mea tauira, ua wharue rato te taritia. Tera ia, te ahuru tautini no I te toi mai.
So we're still developing in Odisha.
Te tāmau nuara rā te taritia I te ria tua whenua.
But we have laid a foundation,
Te weira ho e tātira o te hāmauhia no te mautuahine,
guided by our enduring principles,
e ua pāpahia tēne mau tātira e te arata I atamoa te taritia.
that is slowly beginning to take hold with the people.
E te hamatara rātou, I te mātou, I te mau uhipa e whaingengi hiara I te taritia.
The members embrace the enduring principles.
Te maumero rā, Ai te rātou e whiwhirei e te parau no te arata i a tāmau.
Some of the leaders are fearful that they will lose their status if there are other priesthood ordained, if women are ordained, if young adults begin to serve.
E te wera te teimau ormitua, te ria ra rātou e te teime pīnehi e te mea ia whātoro ana hea te teimau whea api, o rera te teimau whea api pāri, o rera te teimau tuahine, e ria rātou e patahi apei rātou rāpai.
And they were resisting the change.
E te arora rātou e he tauhia te ria whanhaura.
In May, after World Conference, I was invited to the 25th anniversary of the Soir community's youth program.
E te matahiti hamohi ai te mea apora, e murino ai te ria apora, wani hiawo e hare I ruto te oroa no te piti ahuru mapēr ai au te whaatupor ai te motu mea whea api.
In Indian culture, you are a young adult if you are not married.
I ruto te ine tuha whenua, I nitia, me te peu e rahia o e te whaito piti ahuru mapē, e te tāo e henga, e te tae tāne, o jan adulia oe.
At any age, if you are married, you are no longer considered a young adult.
E tāno atu te teime, ai te hoa ia e tāne hoa e te wahine, e jan adu te tāta pāri hoa i oe.
At that gathering, they asked me to bring the keynote address.
I ruto I tau waruru, e rurura te e no te mo praja jan adu, e wan hia o e horu ai te teimona au tauturu.
There were about 1,000 young adults there.
E tei ohi ai, ho e tau tini mo mea whea api pāri te tai mei ruto I tau wariru rurura.
And of course, all the elder leaders.
Promo, amui ato mai te mau peritipu tero elders?
Elder leaders.
Ona, te mau tāta whātere whea pāri pai rātou wā.
I stood before the conference and said to the women there and the young adults that the Partie system is gone and will not return.
Wa tia wo I tau o te mera, e wā parau o te motuahinge, e te mo whea api pāri ma te parau e, ai te whahau te Partie system, tapa I parau I arau era, warewa, e ai te ona e hui whahau mai.
Though we celebrated 50 years in India and are thankful for the past, it is a new future.
E wa whahiti ato o e promo, wo ora tātou e piti ahuru, e pē ahuru mataiti ruto I te ria whanhora, tēnei rā, te hare rā tātou I mua.
And you must be prepared as young adults and as women to step into new roles of leadership.
E u whātea ato o tara parau e, no reira mea mā, te mau whea api pāri, te mau tuahine, a whaingenga ia o tau e tia mai o tau I roto I te tei, whanhaura a api a te taretia.
And to lead the church into the future, you must understand, embrace, and teach those enduring principles because that is who the community of Christ is.
E mei te peu e hina aro o tau e iaora te taretia anan hei, e titauhi ia tātou e ora mai te arata I rā tāmau a te taretia.
Some of the older leaders did not like that message.
Te rā mo mea tāta pāri, ai te rātou a whoro te rā mana o tau.
Some of them embraced the message.
Ho e tuha o rātou, wāuro rātou, ho e rā aita.
On Monday, I leave Tahiti to go to India.
E te monire wā wharue au te whenua nei are o India.
And then the following week, in 5 consecutive days in Odisha, I will be at 5 mission center conferences.
E o tina e harewo wharerei e pae pū mitioni.
And in 2 of those conferences, for the first time in the history of Odisha, 6 women will be called and approved to serve in priesthood offices.
E I roto I nā pūmitioni e piti, a teira I roto I te āmu no te whenua no Odesha, e pihia e ono tuahine I te au tauara.
So it's going to be a new day.
Mahana api te whamaine.
But it has been a painful journey.
E tere rā nhenhe rā te.
Many loving, good people have separated themselves from community of Christ.
Mea reira o te mawhia e ua here te tei ua wawahihi a rātou, e hui whaho mai rātou.
But we think with the young adults and the women, there is a bright future.
E te tiatori ne iau I ruto I te mawhia api pāri e te mo tuahine, ei pāpū mai te mea te mahana no anana hei I ruto I te taretia.
Those are some of the challenges of India.
Tara ia te tei mo tauto ora ano te whenua initia.
And in India, they speak Odia.
I te whenua initia te prepaura rātou te reo Odia.
And if you're in the rural area of Sora, you speak the language of Sora.
I hare nei auto Soria, e pro I auto Sora.
Or if you're in the Kui community, you speak the language of Kui.
Hare nei auto te ria toa whenua, e reo hoa tōna I rutu I te ria toa whenua.
There are more than 300 different languages spoken in India.
Ai te rahi roa te reo proprohi o tono te ria toa, e tolu haneren e reo. Te rahi roa, te rahi roa.
And they're not dialects, they're different languages.
E tera, e ere nahi e paroni, e ere pe mia porinetia, e ere te reo, e ere te dialecta, dialect e reo iti o te tatarahi a mei o. Tera, aita, toru hanere reo. Aita te tahi maramara te tahi reo.
The Sora language was an unwritten language. It was only a spoken language for many, many years.
Te wene te e reo te pehia Sora, aita te e reo papai, e reo prau noa te e wat aita ihia mai te e reo e tero mai te mhana.
If you see the Sora language written out, it looks very much like English letters.
Te I mhana, wa rohia te mea e papai te I reo. Tēnei papai nahia te reo Soran, e tai a reo peretane pa I tei on a oiana.
And that's because the British, when they were in India, they put letters to the language.
I te hia te reira no te mea, te mau oromitua mātāmua I te rātou, rā peretane ia. E uha mata rātou e papai te reo, papai pa I te reo. Nō ria I te hia ie, me papai te wera te maureta peretane I ruto I te reo.
So your prayers for India will be appreciated.
Nō reira mea mā, apure, pure whaarahai, ia manuia whaahoi te whenua no initia. Okay.
Long answers, I apologize.
Promo, potori I te pahonor ano te no ia uira.
But it's much better than the class.
Tēnei rā, no nei, me te e te mea tāu e proproto nei I te hapi rā.
Are there, yes. One moment, we'll bring you the microphone.
Ero, awhehia tu te mea te pāu.
This is an example of two people. They have been baptized, and he asked the question to them, who baptized you? But they don't know. They don't remember who baptized them. We went to meet the people in that congregation, but they don't remember who baptized those persons. We went to the mission center. They don't know who was the pastor who baptized them. This is my question. How can we do for that person? Because we know that they have been baptized. They have been confirmed as a member, but we don't know anymore who was the pastor. And they don't remember who was the pastor baptized and confirmed. This is my question. How could we do for that?
It's a very good question, but it would be one that would be difficult for me to answer.
E wira mai te iroa te ie, ai tera no a mai te ia o te paha no papu mai te tera wira ata oe.
But it is a question that can be asked of the Mission Center leadership, and they can work with you to resolve that situation.
Te tiatori nei oe, ne te pūmiti o ni e imi te teirawe ano te pāhonor ai e tera wira ata oe, nā te pūmiti o ni te ria e hap o I te rira whanhaura.
And your example, it's not the first time that has happened. It has happened in other places, and they've been able to work through and resolve that.
Tēnā wira ata oe, ai te tupono e inei no ari te pumitioni no porini te franei e hi ora ara te I o te tupo I te mau tuha whenua atoa.
So if you will meet with Brother Clement and Sister Lucia, they can help work with you to resolve that.
Nen he rā o I haramai wharere I te tae Clement, te tuai nei Lucia, ia nen he whaafurohia te nei no te pahonora ai te nei wira.
And he was suggesting, okay, why we cannot baptize again? We do the sacrament of baptism again. Just a suggestion.
In the practice of the church, and I even asked the question myself.
I ruto I te whanhora a te taritia, e wira atua te I o te tupu nei ruto I anei.
I was baptized when I was 8 years old.
Wa papatitohia wau e waur au to umataiti.
And when I became in my 20s, I realized what I know now, I didn't know when I was 8, and I should have known.
Te tair awo te whaito e piti ahoru mataiti, ai te wohamana o ahu e nau e papatito ra I au e nawhea pa I o te iteng.
And wondered, maybe I should be rebaptized.
Pene e pā te uiwira o I au so e pene e pā e papatito o ahu pā o I au.
And I shared that with my pastor and my district president.
Wa parau wa aparau mau e te amuira au te hap ore te ria tua amuira tamatau e parau iana e te parau.
And they assured me that my baptism, while at 8 I may not have been fully knowledgeable, that I was old enough to make a commitment and that was a legitimate baptism.
Tēnā ora pai tāna pahonora e mai te mea rei te teime e papititohia e oe, e papititora o te whawhauhia te reira I mua I te atua. Te teime tāmauhia e o whawhauhia te reira I mua I te atua. Ai te roa atua e hupa tā e nen he whaata e tara whawhaur ato o e te atua.
And they asked me, do you share in communion each Sunday or each month? And I said, yes, of course I do.
Tēnā ora e wā ui mei tara te amuira e te hare nei o I pure rā, te mō tāpati atua no te tawini. Ana o ia.
And they said, remember in those services that we are reminded that the sacrament of communion, one element of that is remembrance of our baptism and recommitment to Christ.
Tēnā ora te reo tara te amuira e Iarawena o tā o oru atu whatu I pauro te mau tapati mata mua. Ho e tuha au te oru amua, te oru atu whatu, o I te hamana ora ai tā o e papiti tora, hamana ora ai tā o I te atua, hamana ora ai tā o I ia ietu metia.
And they said, that is in community of Christ, the follow-up from our baptism, that we are reminded of our baptism each time we participate in the sacrament of communion.
Te te mea whauwhaaro e rito I te parau no te papiti tora. O I tera teime whari e o e amo I te oa, o te atua e o ietu metia. Tera te mea whauwha, e haramei o e te pure rā, e haramei o e whari o e tera a te atua. I te mau tapati atua, e whahamana ora ia o I te mau oru atu whatu atua.
And they also shared with me that it was not the practice of the church that if you have been baptized, that you could be rebaptized again.
E uha papu me o ia nei ere te hupa mātauhia, ia papitito whahauhia, ere te hupa mātauhia tu te taritia.
I don't know if there are any exceptions to that.
Ai te wau I te mai te peu te wera te ho e whanhor a tā anei o te whanhauhia no te reira.
But that would be something to discuss with your pastor, your mission center president, and perhaps even the apostle. But normally they will share what I shared with you, that it is through the sacrament of communion that we renew our baptismal covenant, and that requires that we be baptized only once.
No nei rā, te manao nei iau e, mai te peu e hare tātou I te ria whanhora, me te ia piri tātou I tu tātou te amui rā, hare wharere te peritini o tupu mitioni, e pēnei hare roho wharere i to tātou apo te toro. Te nei rā, te mea tāu e hina aro e wawotu mo i tātou, te parau no te mea tātou papiti tō rā, e whahaman āno a tātou i te rera pōura te mō tāpati oru ātoa.
I don't know if that answers your question, but I hope it's somewhat helpful.
E te tiaturi nei iau ai te pātere rei pahono awhororoa i te tāu e wira, o e tauturu ara i tāu e wira.
He's not really, how do I say, happy for the answer, but it's okay. It's okay.
Thank you, Mercedes.
Maruru mai te.
Any other last? Okay. The microphone. There. Oh, thank you, Amanda.
We talked about the ordination of the woman.
Ma question est quelles procédures avons-nous utilisées pour la nomination de notre président?
What are the procedures we made for our future president to about Stacey Graham? What were the procedures? What were the how do we make the decision that our president is Stacey Graham? He wants to know what was the spiritual challenge that we come to have the name of Stacey Graham.
Okay. Thank you for the question.
Maruru tēnei wira.
I would, when Sister Moreva returns and you have opportunity, she can give you a much better answer than me, but I'll share some of my thoughts.
Te tiaturi nei au i hoina mei to tātou apo te toro Morewa, e nana e hananea atua no te pahono I te wira tēnei pe wira.
In the community of Christ, the call to serve as president of the church comes from the current president of the church.
I rito I te taretia te autēno te mitia, te pii rā I te hoe perititeni, I te hoe tāta e hare perititeni no te taretia, no ruto mai oia I te tino ahuru mapiti.
And that has been the practice since Joseph Smith III, the first president of the reorganization.
E te I whanhora, no ruto ro mai I te perititeni I te whatemita toru.
Each of the presidents, former presidents, through discernment and prayer, brought to the church the name of the one who would replace them.
I roto I te whanhora, e parhei hoi ana tino ahuru mapiti, I roto I te pure, I roto I te matutu tūr amana, e o tina, e whahoihia mai te tei oa, e tuhi I roto I te nā tino ahuru mapiti.
It was a few years before I was born, but Brother Israel A. Smith died in a car crash driving from Independence to Lamoni, Iowa.
Te haman ora wau vai tamari e iau, ai te pāo whānuhi atura, e tu tātou periteni I tara era tātou, wa uhia te tei ati poromu I taua anu taura, te huira ona I te tei tua whenua.
But he had prepared in advance a letter that he designating who should be the president should he die before he could make that official to the church.
E wa I te hi ara wa papai na oia I te tei rata, no te whai te ra ia tupuna te tei whiwhi, o ona te tātai ihia no te monu ra iana I perititei.
And he told the presiding evangelist and several others that the letter of designation was in the vault should he die, then they should go retrieve the letter, and then in that letter share that with the body of the church, and that's what took place.
Mai te mea e wānihia te tino no te mau hapi e waniria, e tēno atu te tai mau tino atu no te ara te taritia, e tei o rātou nā moaroa, e o tēnei rātou te tei o, e ria i tūhia i tēnei rata I moe tō te taritia.
Brother Grant McMurray, for health reasons, when he was president, stepped down as president and said rather than he, as his responsibility to choose, that he would allow the church process to fall to the Council of 12 Apostles, who would be given the responsibility for designating who should be the president of the community of Christ.
Ha mana ora tātou, te tiara mai tō tātou periteni o McMurray, e periteni no te taritia, e wa ite ona e mehi ona I taua teimera. E wa vaiso ona I te ria tua no e nā te tino ahuru mapiti, e whiruri e nomino o waia te periteni e mono iana.
And that was the first time that had happened in the history of the church.
E rutu I te tua ai e taritia, a teira, a whatupu whahohi ai te whanhora.
And after a year of prayer and discernment, the Council of 12 announced to the church that Brother Steve Veazey, they felt, is who is being called to be president, and would submit that name to the World Conference for approval.
E wa ite mei e tātou e, wa pau ia mataiti o whaia te tino ahuru mapiti ruto I te pure, ruto I te mātutura atu, e wa whamai hoa te oa no te taerau Steve Veazey, e wa wherure mai te hia ruto I te whatere rā te taritia, e wa tuhi atu I mua I tō te aporani.
About 6 months before the 2023 World Conference, Brother Veazey announced to the church that he would be retiring, and that he invited the whole church to join with him in prayer in discerning who should replace him as the next president of the church.
Ha mana ora tātou, hou a tupu e tēne apora o te ao nei I maeri e o nei, wāni tō te periteni o Steve Veazey, tō te tāto ara o e taretia e, ia pārhei rutu te pure, no te mea te whaingenge o ia e hare te mea whātuha ara. E wāni o ia tō e taretia e pure no te itera e o ai te mono iana.
It was his responsibility,
Prono, ti roto iana, te ria whaotira,
but he established a process where the entire church would be prayerful in assisting him in discerning God's call for leadership in the church.
te nei rā, wa mana ona e, mea mei te atoa nā tō e taritia nui, nā te tātoa rao e taritia, e nenhe e pure, no te itera e, o wai te nenhe, e mono iana, e perititeni.
But you may recall last July, August, Brother Veazey encountered some very difficult health situations that had him have to step down in his role as president for health reasons.
E hamana ora tātou te awa e tiurei a te maeri anei, e wa whaite mei periteni e wa tupuhia worohi o nei te tei mai, e te iana I vaiso I tōna te ara e periteni no te tei o e tau.
And because of this, he felt it necessary to take the responsibility of calling the president from him, and again turn to the Council of 12 and ask them to lead the discernment and decision regarding who should be called to serve as president of the church.
E no te huru hoi o te tupu I so I tōna tino, ua whiruri o ia e teime tano te no te ani ai e te tino horu mapiti e hamata I te whiruri e o wai te oa tano no te mono ia I te whatere rā te taretia.
And Sister Moreva is the president of the Council of 12.
E o te mei e tātou e, o tō tātou ia tuahine marewa, te perititeni no te tino horu mapiti.
And so she became the person designated to coordinate the efforts of the Council of 12.
E wariroho I o ia, e nāna e tia au I te ria ani rā ato te perititeni. O ia e ruru ia nā tino horu mapiti, e hamata te whanhora no te whiruri, e mātutu, e pure, e pārheiruto I te mea te whanhora no te whainine ai te oa.
And that's why I'm saying when Moreva returns, she is much more equipped to answer the question than I am.
E te tātai nen he whaatama I te ia tātou e hate hupa te tupu I rito I te ia nomino rā, o tō tātou ia tūheni marewa.
She was intimately involved in the decision process.
E no te mea e waoro o nei roto i te whaanhora a, no te parau no te nominora ai ai tō tātou ni peritini.
I do know the Council of 12 felt they wanted to be faithful to the guidance that Brother Vizi had given and continued to ask the church to assist them in prayer and discernment for who should be president.
E wai te au e mea papu mai te tino horo mā piti hina aroho a rātou e turu. E turu mai tō tātou peritini o Steve Vizi, i ruto i tāna whaanhora a, i ruto i tāna hioa te ara a, e tā moi hoa i te pure nōna.
And then the Council of 12 outlined their process, and I'll let Sister Moreva speak to that because I'm less familiar, because I was not involved with any of that process.
E ruto i te whaanhora a, e wā proproud i wau i tō tātou ni tuahini, te eni rā, o marewa huai a te tātai tano no te proproud a mai e wau i te mō mana a hua mai tei, e ha te mō mea o te tupu.
I'm just a little old bishop from Texas.
O wau e piti tōpō no te whenua Texas, piti tōpō nei roa.
But of course, the Council of 12 recently announced to the church that with strong conviction and strong testimonies, they have felt clear guidance from the Spirit of God that Sister Stacy Cram is called to lead the church as president of community.
Wei te paurua tātou e, wā whaarahia, e tau AMRI nei e, nā roto i te wārua papu, nā roto i te mana o papu, nā roto i te teimo pure, e wā wauhia mai te oa, no te tātau te ngenhe mono iana e peritini.
And at the 2025 conference, Brother Vizi, who is recovering and now functioning again, will lead the conference. We'll call upon the Council of 12 to present a resolution of who should be president, and then the World Conference will vote upon that recommendation.
E te ia apora piti ahuru mapa, i reira nā te peritini hoa Steve Vizi arata i te apora, e rutu i te ria apora, e anihia tino ahuru mapiti e hora mai te oa, e tuhia te oa I mua tu te apora anuia.
And if approved, then at the conference, Sister Stacy will be set apart as president of Community of Christ.
Me te peu e mana mai te urahi e te oa o Stacy Cram, tu tātou tuahine, e mana mai o ia e peritini no te taritia.
And you get to have Sister Stacy in just a few weeks.
Te vai e whaahia roa, e taime tō tātou peritini o Stacy, tau mhana inoa, tau mhana no e taime o nei e so I tātou, e ora I te tei urara e tātou nei.
You will be the first area that I know will give her a rich blessing.
Tāu I te, o tō te whenua mātā mua e, o te hamai tei, whaarahirua te hamai tei e, ne whaari ai ana e, e hui nei ona, I roa tu ona te mō hamai tei ai, e tenen he whaari.
And that will mean a lot to Sister Stacy.
Ia uehi o nei, mea raheitara no tō tātou tuahine Stacy.
Thank you.
Oi, c'est la poule.
You just used up some of your break time.
Tano mai te tarahora,
Let's take a break and come back at 7:30.
Hari.